Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The PA is In. I'm excited to share today's discussion with you all about lipids and what we can do personally and as providers to prevent things that we really do not want to live through and we really do not want our patients to experience, namely heart attacks, strokes, and down the road, dementia. Today's guest is Josh Wageman. He is an MSL, he is a clinical lipid specialist, and he is a newly minted author coming to tell us about some of the latest advancements in tracking lipids for your patient and managing their risks, and in also taking care of yourself and your own arteries and managing those plaques. So without further ado, here he is, Josh Wageman. Josh, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to be here.
Same. So tell us about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I have a very eclectic background, a cornucopia of sorts, one might say. My first doctorate was actually in physical therapy. So I'm a physical therapist, but I actually got really sick when I was in grad school the first time. And I believe God uses these situations, even the bad ones, to catalyze what you're really supposed to do when you grow up. And so I got fascinated with endocrinology during that time. And so even though I finished PT school and practice as a physical therapist for several years, there was never a sense of finality for me. And so what I did was I went back to PA school. So I went to the Yale School of Medicine, enjoyed that. It was amazing. And then I ended up practicing in endocrinology. And I actually got into lipids, and I am a clinical lipid specialist. And so what got me into lipids is I was sitting there and a patient canceled one day, and I'm always reading stuff. And I read this obnoxiously condescendingly titled article, something like Basics of Lipoproteins. And I'm like, I'm pretty good at biochemistry. How hard can this be? And so I read this article and I barely understood any of it, and it made me mad. And so I was like, well, that's unacceptable. So I decided I was going to attempt to try to learn everything there was about lipids and lipoproteins and cholesterol. And, you're never going to learn all these things. And it's amazing because I learn things every day. But in the process of learning some stuff, you can hopefully teach other people what you've learned and hopefully help people not have heart attacks, strokes, and dementia, which is my whole goal for all of the things that I do and why I actually recently wrote this book, The Home Security System in the Lipid Neighborhood, which you will be able to get for yourselves at the time that this podcast is released. So I actually also have my PhD studying cholesterol disturbances in Alzheimer's disease because I can't help myself and I don't have many useful skills in this world, but going to school and taking tests are two of those things that I am fairly skilled at. But that is expensive, right? It's a very expensive hobby. And so my wife encouraged me to find other outlets for my creativity. And that's why I wrote this book too. So that's another practical reason. But really my goal with this book and with all these endeavors, I do a lot of adjunct professor work at various medical programs too, is just to help people understand this stuff. There's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to cholesterol. Things get very tribal and people are yelling things and probably don't really know what they mean. And so I just want to give people a better understanding of this. And ultimately, I want you, whoever you are, whether you're a clinician, whether you're not a clinician, to not have heart attacks, strokes, and dementia. And so that's really why I do these things. I'm very blessed to be able to do those things. And then my day job, which I'm very careful to keep dissociated from all my fun side endeavors, is as a medical science liaison for Amgen, the biotech company. And so as we're having fun here, everything I say, the opinions are my own. They do not represent the strategies or perspectives of Amgen or any other pharmaceutical company. So I always have to give that caveat so that we can have pure, unadulterated bliss with all the things that we discuss.
So what you're telling me is you wrote a book to avoid getting a fourth high-level degree.
Pretty much. I mean, but also at the same time, I am very blessed to have creative outlets. I've been known to rap about lipids, at our national conferences before, and make parodies of various pop songs and talk about cardiometabolic disease. My recent one's not a rap. It's actually a parody of something called Waving Through a Window from the musical Dear Evan Hansen. I rewrote it to be Taking the Mount Jaro. And it's a person's journey of failing Contrave and phentermine, but arriving at the pinnacle of newly found metabolic health after coming upon tirzepatide. So anyway, I have fun with this, right? It's just a fun way to do things. And what I try to do, whatever I do, whether it be making parodies of songs or whether it be writing books that is explaining biochemistry, what I try to do is walk with kings, but not lose the common touch. I want to have a truly regal understanding of physiology, but I want to be able to convey it in a relatable manner so that we can understand these things that go into not having heart attacks, strokes, and dementia.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that touches all aspects of practicing medicine, and also just for our own walking around what we can do to make ourselves the most, healthy, sustainable, to promote our own longevity so we can have these wonderful lives. Like those things that you're saying, no one wants, but especially when you've worked in medicine and you see how incredibly damaging a heart attack, a stroke, how dementia affects the patient, but also their entire family in terms of how they are caring for that person. These are just really, really massive things. So we're going to jump ahead a little bit here, but what should every single person listening to this show know about lipids? What are like the very basics of what we should know?
Yes. And so here's where my framework for cardiovascular disease comes into play. And so for everybody who does not want to have heart attacks, strokes, and down the line dementia, I want you to have a great home security system, and I want you to live in a safe lipid neighborhood. Your home security system has 4 basic pillars: normal blood sugar, normal blood pressure, keep inflammation low, and don't smoke or do drugs. Those are bad. But then your lipid neighborhood, that's your cholesterol panel. Because every ApoB containing particle, the majority of those being LDL particles, are potentially criminals that can infiltrate your arterial abode. And the lipoprotein little a particles, those are potentially the felons if you pick the wrong parents and you have that genetic factor. So, how's your home security system? Nobody's 2025 New Year's resolution was, I want to be more insulin resistant, or you know what? I think this is the year I start smoking. No, we can look at those things. Those are axiomatic. Normal blood sugar, normal blood pressure, keep inflammation low, don't smoke. But then that cholesterol panel, it can give you an idea of what kind of lipid neighborhood you're living in. It can kind of look rough, maybe on paper, but people don't live on paper, do they? So my catchphrase for this is, got plaque? Get a CAC. What is a CAC? A coronary artery calcium score. It's the colonoscopy of the heart without the nasty pregame show. Because anybody who's done a bowel prep knows that temporarily, ruins your social life and probably destroys your bathroom. But with a CAC, it's a low-dose CT scan, 0.6 millisieverts, the same amount of radiation as a mammogram. So virtually nothing. You lay down, you take a breath in, and it says, hey, do you have calcified plaque in your coronary arteries, which is a late finding in the whole process, or do you not? And if you do, you've been broken into. So if you've been broken into, well, do you want to keep living in the same rough lipid neighborhood that got you broken into? Or do you maybe want to consider moving to a nice, safe, gated community with fewer lipid criminals? That seems reasonable. And then we can talk about ways to do that, to get ahead of the game, to shift the paradigm from reactionary to prevention. And that's really what I want for everybody. And we can kind of further unpack that as we go as well.
Have you ever opened a CT, MRI, or X-ray and felt a wave of self-doubt? You're not alone. Whether you're a new grad or stepping into a new specialty, reading imaging can be one of the most intimidating parts of clinical practice. That's where Guardian Light CME comes in. This interactive, case-based tool helps you to sharpen your imaging skills and earn CME while you do it. Start now at zaronlabs.com/guardianlight and use the code Tracy10 for 10% off. You'll review real-world cases with clinical context, scroll through the actual imaging, just like when you review imaging at work, and here's the best part, test your eye by toggling key findings on and off to see if you can catch them on your own first. You'll find real imaging impressions, clear teaching points, one-click CME certificates, and new cases sent directly to your inbox each and every week. You get to see it, know it, and catch it before it matters most in real life. Are you ready to gain clinical confidence and read images with ease? Head to zaronlabs.com/guardianlight. That's ZAURON labs.com/guardianlight, LITE, with the code Tracy10 for your discount. Is this something that you're recommending? Well, you're not our clinician and we're not making specific recommendations, but young and healthy, family history, like who qualifies for this? Is this something people are paying for out of pocket? Is insurance covering this? What does that look like in terms of actually getting the scan?
Sure. And so there are limitations to CAC. CAC is a great screen, okay? But in a young person, right, it's not super useful because it takes a while for this calcified plaque to manifest. And calcified plaque is more like a scab. It shows you've been broken into, it shows there's been damage, but hopefully you've actually done some healing, and it just shows that there has been a break-in though. And so in a young person under 40, CAC isn't always the best. Now, you can still get a CAC if you're under 40. And if you have a score above 0, holy smokes, you have a 5x risk of a premature event from the Cardiac Consortium. So it can still be meaningful if it's above 0 in a young person, but it doesn't tell you the entire story. And so at age 40, my approach for everybody is, hey, get your first CAC, fire up a 0, check back in 5 years. Similar to when you get a colonoscopy, if you have a polyp or two, they don't say, well, you got some polyps. Let's wait around for you to get colon cancer, and then maybe we'll do something about it. No, they take them out, and then you check back at regular intervals. And so that's my approach. If you've been broken into, well, we have therapeutics that can not only stabilize plaque, but even potentially regress that coronary plaque. We can get ahead of the game and make it to where you don't have the big one. Okay? Because 2/3 of events happen in a non-obstructed vessel. You're fine till you're not. And if you have any plaque, well, do you want it stable or unstable? I'd prefer it stable. And then if you can even have plaque regression, that would be preferable. And so getting ahead of the game is of paramount importance. And then for the young person, we should all be emphasizing that home security system all across the lifespan. But if somebody has a really rough family history, it's important to know that. And are there imaging techniques that can identify plaque in other arterial beds and identify soft plaque and stenosis, like CT angiography with AI, things like Clearly. People have heard of Clearly and HeartFlow. Those are really good modalities. A skilled sonographer can do carotid IMT with plaque assessment if they use B-mode ultrasound. People can even check iliofemoral ultrasounds because in the PESA study, 44% of atherosclerosis started in the iliofemoral arteries. Now, do I think we need to go, around and, do ultrasounds of everybody's iliofemoral distribution? I don't. But at the same time, let's know where we stand. Let's know our genetics. Let's know our biomarkers. Let's know all the things that suggest that we have either a good home security system or that's impaired. And let's look at our lipid neighborhood. And, we've got a variety of imaging tests that we can use too to identify disease in its infancy before it gets out of hand. And so that's what it's all about. And there's all these things in the book that kind of tell you, hey, this is what you should consider here. This is where you could maybe consider this. And so it tries to break that down for everybody.
Now, some of those biomarkers, is lipoprotein A getting checked when you get a total cholesterol panel, when you're getting those lipids? Do they have to order that separately? I feel like that's
so lipoprotein little a is a separate test. And the recommendation right now is to get it checked at least once in a lifetime. Okay. So it doesn't really vary too much person to person. And so you either have high Lp(a), you have low Lp(a), or maybe you're somewhere in the middle. It's the people in the middle that it's worth rechecking sometimes, particularly in certain situations. Because lipoprotein(a), although fairly stable, can rise when someone starts a statin. So statins do a lot of good things, but lipoprotein(a) is an independent risk factor, and statins on average actually increase lipoprotein little a by about 19.3%. Now, if you already have low lipoprotein little a, it probably won't increase it very much, but that's not part of your problem anyway. And so additionally, the menopausal transition is cruel for many reasons. Anybody who says it's fair is wrong. And estrogen actually does reduce the basal production rate of lipoprotein little a. So when that is lost, well, people can go from the intermediate risk range into a higher risk range with Lp(a) levels, because your true colors unfortunately show during that transition. And so those are two specific situations where you could reconsider rechecking lipoprotein little a levels. I think rechecking lipoprotein little a will be more common when we actually have specific therapeutics for lipoprotein little a. Currently, the only FDA-approved treatment for lipoprotein little a and people who have disease is lipoprotein apheresis, which is like dialysis of your lipoproteins. You have to get central access. You do it every couple of weeks. That's the only FDA-approved treatment. So there is no medication approved for lowering lipoprotein little a and reducing cardiovascular events currently. There's some art of medicine situations that people can consider when they're addressing people who have high lipoprotein little a, but there isn't anything specific currently.
Interesting. So we're talking about big things, right? We're talking about heart attacks, strokes, we're talking about dementia down the road. Are there warning signs like angina, like TIAs, or even before you get to that point that people are like, hey, I am headed in a direction that is going towards a bad neighborhood. I am headed in a direction that is like weakening my home defenses. Are there things that we can find in our patients or notice in ourselves that would give us a clue that we're not going in a good direction?
Yeah. So the symptoms itself, I wouldn't rely just on symptoms, because oftentimes the first symptom is still the first event. You're fine till you're not, in older studies, and even recently the ICONIC study, 2/3 of MIs were in a completely non-obstructive vessel. And so it's that vulnerable plaque that ruptures, and then bam, you're 100% occluded. And so for me, I'm I prioritize insulin resistance above most everything else. Control your insulin, control your life is one of my mantras, because really this goes back to the teleology of lipoproteins. And so what we're taught in school is, LDL bad, HDL good, everybody take a statin, and that's why we need Zofran, because that's nauseating rhetoric. But really the purpose of the ApoB containing lipoproteins is not to give you and me heart disease. The purpose of these lipoproteins is to be mailmen. Mailmen aren't necessarily bad dudes, but if the mailman runs his truck in your arterial wall, that's a bad mailman, and we need to address the corrupt workforce. And so the whole purpose of these mailmen is to deliver triglycerides, primarily, a few phospholipids, a few fat-soluble vitamins to target tissues, primarily the fat cell and the muscle cell, and then go home at the end of the day. Where is home? The liver. Great. Mailmen go out, deliver the mail, go home at the end of the day, we're all good, okay? And so in conditions of insulin resistance, though, when the mailboxes are full, the mailmen are out there trying to deliver the mail, and your mailboxes are full. Your cellular mailboxes are full. They can't ram in more mail to your packed out mailboxes. So what are they going to do? Well, drive around aimlessly, maybe run their trucks in your arterial wall. That's why we see a 2 to 4-fold increase in cardiovascular mortality in people with diabetes, which is the most profound example of insulin resistance, okay? And you know what else happens? The mailman can get caught in a sugar storm. It's hard to drive in a storm. I've been caught in some blizzards. I actually flipped my car one time. It was the most terrifying thing. I lived the song, Jesus Take the Wheel, and it was horrible, and it was because I got caught in a whiteout when I was driving. Well, guess what? If you are caught in a sugar storm as a mailman, guess what? You're more prone to run your truck in arterial wall. And so there are all these factors, and a lot of them due to insulin resistance, which impaired fasting glucose, insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, it's kind of like being almost pregnant. It's just a matter of how far along you are on that continuum. They're all the same thing. And so addressing that in its infancy is super, super important. And so those are really the things that I like to prioritize. And additionally, there are simple tests that can help us identify your home security system being impaired even before we see other signs of end organ damage. For instance, a microalbumin. Getting a urinary microalbumin if you are leaking significant amounts of protein in your urine, even if you are non-diabetic and non-hypertensive, your home security system is not as good as you think it is. Okay, from Epic and Norfolk, 148% and 203% increase in all-cause mortality and cardiovascular mortality, respectively, in people with proteinuria, even if they didn't have hypertension or diabetes. And so there's those. I mean, that's an easy test too. Oh, right, go pee for me, And then, if you're having to flush several times after you pee, well, you probably got nephrotic syndrome. But still, if you're leaking any sort of protein in your urine, that's not good. And then we need to aggressively intervene and see why that's occurring. And so I think some of these biomarkers, especially the ones of insulin resistance, and we can measure fasting insulin. I'm a big fan of HOMA-IR. And we can even, if we know how to make sense of advanced lipid panels, we can identify insulin resistance early there. Some people like oral glucose tolerance tests. Some people like nasty boluses of glucola too. I'm not a huge fan of those because they're gross. If you understand how to interpret an advanced lipid panel, you can oftentimes avoid the glucola and detect insulin resistance there first as well. But really getting it ahead of the game when it comes to metabolic conditions is going to ensure that those mailmen don't go rogue and run their trucks in your arterial wall. Now, there are certain conditions too. Picking the right parents is a big part of the charade. Sometimes people will live in such a rough lipid neighborhood that they can have a great home security system and still get broken into. People with homozygous FH, some people with heterozygous FH, some people with elevated lipoprotein little a. I have a good friend. His one risk factor was lipoprotein little a. And he had a CAC of 2,814 and had to have a 5-vessel CABG earlier this year, coronary artery bypass graft. And so that was his one risk factor. He wasn't insulin resistant at all. He decided to not start doing drugs, no systemic inflammation, and no hypertension. And, he picked the wrong parents, right? But a lot of times when you just ask that family history question and it's like, oh yeah, this person had this event and this event and this event, and your eyes are getting big, you're like, oh boy, that's not good. That is going to help you say, well, let's check some of these other things and, try to get ahead of the game on this.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, we talk a lot on this show about self-care and wellness and the choices that we make for ourselves and how those make us better to be able to show up and serve the world. How has this sort of very detailed, in-depth knowledge of lipids and cardiac and all of these perfusions that we obviously need, a heart that gets good blood flow, a brain that gets good blood flow, how has that affected your choices in terms of activity, diet, wellness? What do you do that we should maybe emulate or is evidence-based in our own lives?
Yeah. So what's kind of funny to me is people can get really granular about this. There can be people who, they wear continuous glucose monitors all the time. And, and ironically, it probably stresses them out more because they're like, oh no, my glucose went from 90 to 94. And then, then it spikes up even more because you're stressed, and you get a catecholaminergic response. And so, and people can get very granular and they wear their Oura rings and they're making sure that they're getting great sleep and all this. But my thing for metabolic health is you got to get good sleep. Okay. Sleep is essential. One of my favorite studies is there was a group of 20-something-year-olds at the height of their mitochondrial powers, no insulin resistance whatsoever, even on an oral glucose tolerance test. They had them not sleep. They deprived them less than 4 hours for 5 days. And then the other group just slept as much as they wanted. After 5 days, half of that sleep-deprived group had levels consistent with prediabetes on their oral glucose tolerance test. 5 days. It takes a long time of doing unspeakable things to yourself and not moving at all to get to prediabetes, and yet not sleeping is the quickest way to do it. So sleep is so important. So important. And it's passive. You just got to let go. Anytime you're like, oh, I want to really try to get a good night's sleep. No, you're tossing and turning on that. You just got to let go. And so sleep is critical, right? And then, nobody ever said, I want to be more sedentary. No, you got to move. And movement is, more than just, wandering around. Wandering around is great, but there has to be some, form of cardiovascular exercise. VO2 max associations with longevity and not dying from all causes is so great when it comes to people in the higher VO2 max quartiles versus the lower, but also resistance training. Nobody ever said, I wish I was weaker. And heavy things are not going to pick themselves up. And so, your bodies we're trying to get weaker. We're fighting the inevitable decline, and so you need to, actually pull that resistance exercise lever and pull it pretty aggressively, particularly since, your skeletal muscle is the biggest anatomical reservoir for glucose disposal. And so, control your insulin, control your life, baby. And you can actually dispose of glucose via insulin independent mechanisms and minimize the required dose that your body has to produce of insulin to actually make sure that you have normal glycemia. So those are all really big factors. So sleep, move, and then don't eat crap. What is that? I will say there are multiple dietary strategies that can work for various people, right? But anytime somebody is going to Krispy Kreme, I don't think they're saying, you know what, today I am consciously making a good health choice. I'm going to Krispy Kreme. This is great. I have decided to clean up my act. No, you know that you're eating something that is horrible for you when you're going through Krispy Kreme. Same with like corn dogs. You go to the fair, it smells magical. But are those things good for you? Intuitively, it's not. So how do we simplify this? And I would go through and I would ask patients like what they ate, and we would go through, and this is one of my appointments took an hour and a half, and why I made $14 an hour when I was in clinical practice with no benefits. But anyway, that's another side tangent. But here's the thing. Prioritize protein, eat real food. That's pretty much it, right? And there you go. And that's my brief recommendation. And some would say it's a cop-out, but that works. That's what I try to endorse. And so for myself, I was a collegiate track guy. I was a big time overtrained person. I kind of tend to be on the excess if I'm not careful. That's my stumbling block. Athletic performance was definitely an idol, and I had to be totally shattered and humbled to realize that I was my priorities were not in the right place. So I'm that rare person who has that sort of issue. But what do I do on a daily basis? Well, I prioritize protein, eat real food. I don't do as much like what they call zone 2 exercise, just that steady state aerobic exercise where if somebody listened to you, they could tell that you were running, but you can still carry on a conversation. That's about the effort level there. I do some of that, probably not as much as I ought to. I sprint a lot just because power really declines, and the shift from your fast twitch to slow twitch does occur proportionally with age if you don't do something about it. And so I sprint regularly. I do the youth ministries in my church, so I still have to be able to throw down when we play pickup basketball and the young kids and show them that the old guy actually, even though he's not in his prime, can still do something. And so those sort of things. And I lift, I regularly lift weights and and there's different things, but really consistency is huge, right? The best diet that someone can do is the one that you're going to be consistent with. The best exercise regimen you can do is the one that you're going to be consistent with, and I think that there is an unquantifiable benefit in social activities when it comes to exercise. In the Copenhagen Heart Study, the exercises associated with longevity the most were racket sports, things like pickleball, things like racquetball, things like tennis, and that's awesome, and my wife and I play racquetball together, and she's actually quite good. Pickleball we've played. Interestingly, people get really territorial on the pickleball courts. They're usually about twice my age, and I'm glad that they're out there doing it. But man, some of those people get mean and cantankerous. It's like, this is my court. I'm like, this is a public park, sir. But anyway, but it's fun, right? And so anytime that you're having fun, you're introducing a social aspect and also getting out of just that sagittal plane. People that are just jogging, and they tend to be a little bit skinny fat. Go for it, jog, but also make sure you're lifting some weights and doing some other stuff too. And so anyway, so that's just a little bit of things to consider. But really just get out there and do stuff, live life. I believe that the two things I enjoy most in life are learning and moving. Well, that's great, right? God gave us brains and we can learn and spend our whole lives learning. And then he gave us bodies that can move, and that's great. And if you stop moving and you stop learning, I don't think life would be that fun. And so anyway, so just keep on doing it, and find some people to do it with too, because I think life is much better lived amongst friends. And I'm very, very blessed to have lots of friends, and meet a ton of really cool people. Being an MSL, the best thing about being an MSL, honestly, is just being able to meet so many cool people. The best things that have come about all my, crazy side endeavors and writing books and being a professor, which still sounds funny to me, is just meeting so many cool people and being a part of people's lives and having some fun in the process.
You know what's underrated? Feeling seen. That's what happened the first time I logged into Sermo. The questions? Spot on. The responses? Thoughtful and supportive. The community? Full of APPs who are juggling the same chaos I am, and somehow doing it with sarcasm, caffeine, and a touch of brilliance. I've connected with fellow surgery PAs, given advice to new grads, and realized, surprise, we are all just humans practicing medicine in scrubs, hungry for community and doing the best we can. Oh, and the surveys? Yeah, Sermo basically funded my 5-day ski trip to Banff. Flights and food, courtesy of me, my brain, and Sermo's survey thank you payments. So if you're craving community, extra cash, and real talk with people who get it, come and join us. Sermo. Talk medicine, talk life, talk about that one patient from Thursday you can't stop thinking about. Sign up today using the link in the show notes and get $20 bonus just for joining. So if you're willing to share a little bit about that transition, I think there is some air of mystery around what is an MSL? What does this person do? And how does one go from practicing clinical medicine to working in industry in that capacity? So what was that journey like for you?
Yeah. So the journey, like most of my journey, was unusual, and it took an unusual string of events to lead to it. But an MSL is a Medical Science Liaison. And when I actually say what those words, the words of what that acronym means, people still don't know what a Medical Science Liaison really means. They just kind of nod and they're like, oh, okay. Oh, you liaise. Yeah, and medical. I know that word. Science. Yeah, we love the science. Anyway, so it's kind of funny, but really, an MSL is sort of like a magical centaur hybrid of kind of a professor slash somebody who supports ongoing clinical research trials and also is a representative of a pharmaceutical company. You can be a MSL for a device company as well. And so that's kind of what it's like. And essentially, you get paid to learn and teach. That's kind of awesome. It's kind of like being in academia without being in academia and getting frustrated when you write for grants and you get denied. So it's actually it's a cool gig. It's really, really great. What they most of the time like is for you to have a doctoral degree of some kind. I've got two, so I guess you can just pick which one you like. But at the time that I actually went into industry, I just had my doctorate in physical therapy, which was funny that I was I went into a metabolic and cardiometabolic disease state. But also, I'm a weird guy and have all sorts of eclectic backgrounds. So anyway, and so they like to have you have a doctorate. It's very common actually for people who are physician assistants. To go and get a DMSC. That's something I see a lot. A lot of times too, even if you don't have a doctorate, the companies will work with you and allow you to kind of still be taking the courses to finish up a DMSC or something along those lines, even as you're working in industry. And I think that that's good because the magic is in the person, not the credential. And I firmly believe that, whatever you are and whatever credentials you have, okay, cool. It shows that you have some background and you did some stuff, but you are the person that has some real, real awesome qualities about you. And I think that they're going to find you, and they'll work with you based on that. But in general, they like you to have a doctoral degree of some sort, but not always. And so that's something that is just a little bit of a pearl, if you will. And like I say, you are always welcome to reach out to me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, because my goal is obviously to help everybody not have heart attacks, strokes, and dementia. But if I can help you on a professional level too, I would love to do that. And so you're always welcome to reach out to me if you want some other information on that transition or anything along those lines.
Yeah. Awesome. So with that, where can people go to find this book? Is LinkedIn the best place to connect with you if they want to learn more and follow along?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to meet me. And this is the book, The Home Security System in the Lipid Neighborhood. This is currently it's actually not available. It's sort of banned, which is pretty funny. By the time this podcast comes out, it will not be banned. You can get this, go on Amazon, and it'll be there for you. But this is a limited edition, first edition banned copy, and hey, maybe that even gets you more excited because this is like forbidden fruit. And being banned temporarily worked out really well for Mark Twain, for Aldous Huxley, for George Orwell. So I think I'm in some pretty good company there. So pretty cool. But anyway, and it's not like I did anything bad or something. It's just a logistical misunderstanding deal, but we can joke about it, and it's funny. So anyway, so you'll be able to get that, and I think that'll really hopefully make you laugh a little, make you learn a lot, and then you can come away with a relatable framework for not having cardiovascular disease and dementia. And that's the whole goal. But yeah, you can find me on any of these social media type platforms. I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter. There's some real nerds, me included, on there, and we talk about, oh, look at this article on ANGPTL4 and diabetic retinopathy. And so there's some wild stuff on there, and people are like, oof, we better get out real quick. So that's where it gets a little esoteric sometimes. I try to be more normal on LinkedIn and on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook too if you want. And like I said, as long as you have no ulterior motives or something really bizarre, I would love to help you out in any way I can.
Awesome. Well, this has been super informative. When I have an episode like this, I always think I should petition them that I need to get CME because I'm just learning so much from these experts that are coming on the show. So why don't I get CME for interviewing you? Because I definitely learned a ton. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us, Josh. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I love any episode that reminds me that common sense still prevails. And once you know the science and once you understand these things, that you can start showing up really well for yourself and for your patients. And that the things that we need to change and do are already things that we know we need to be doing, to be eating well, to be moving our bodies, and to be reminding our patients to make really great choices, because the choices that they make combined with some of these genetic factors do really profoundly influence their risks of some of these major events like heart attacks, strokes, and dementia. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to another episode of The PA is In. Could you do me a favor? Could you head to your favorite podcast platform and give us 5 stars and a written review? Send this episode to a friend who is into cardiovascular health, who likes to work out, who is into preventative medicine, who really deeply cares about their patients and wants to be doing what is best for them. You sharing this show, you writing that review is essential to a show like ours for us to grow and serve more providers inside of this space. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.